Thank you for coming, everybody. We're here at Cannabis Capitol tonight, and we have a panel of three very exciting people who work in the cannabis space. Tonight, our topic is about cannabis distribution, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So we want to thank Capital Cannabis Cannabis Capitol for being our host. These people right here next to me are Danny. We have Hab, and then we have Sal. And we're going to let them introduce themselves in a moment. But first off, my name is Brett Maycumber. I'll be your moderator for this evening. I have a company called Cannikins. We're a business and technology firm. And then I also work with the LBCA to teach the metric and compliance course for the LBCC course. So without further ado, we'll have Danny introduce himself.
Hi, what's up, everybody? My name is Danny Polanco. I am the licensed owner of Rolling Valley Distribution out in LA. We're based in Sun Valley. And I'm also the owner of Said Connects. It's a cannabis entrepreneurial dialogues. We're a podcast that focuses on people of color, brands of color, minorities that are in the space to be able to share their story and their experiences. And yeah, thank you. Thank you guys for having me.
Thank you. Hab?
Hey everybody, Hab Haddad, founder and CEO of Greenpoint Holdings, and also one of the founders of High and Mighty, our house brand, where we make some of the best topicals in the world. We also, thank you very much, thank you. We're also a large bulk distillate wholesaler and Type 6 manufacturing lab. Proud member of the LBCA, also teach a distribution course for the Long Beach City College. And proud to be a Long Beach cannabis business owner.
Thank you, Hab. Sal.
How you doing, everyone? My name is Sal DeSalvatore. I'm with Continuum Distribution. We're a large-scale distribution company that represent a bunch of brands. I wrote them all here, and I was going to say them, but as I look at this, I'm like, just trust me, we represent a bunch of brands. I've been smoking weed and growing weed my whole life. Like, I come from a really cannabis rich background. Like, my family's been involved in the game forever. My first grow that I ever helped trim and stuff was in sixth grade type stuff. So just super happy to be where I'm at. Love my job and happy to be here tonight.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. Round of applause. That's awesome. All right, so we're going to go ahead and dive right in. So we have some questions that we're going to ask the panelists. We always encourage them to be free form in their conversation. So hopefully we'll be able to cover a number of the topics that we all feel is important tonight. So starting off, we want to know, if you're a distro as a small business or an equity owner, how might you compete with some of the larger distro companies?
I'll start. So with the larger distros, one of the things that when speaking to brands, I just got my license in June, so we're starting off, and so we're considered a small business. But I've been working in the industry for quite some time. I started with a well-known brand. I was one of the originals from a well-known brand, and we blew up. We self-manufactured, we self-distributed, and I am where I am now. And when reaching out to smaller brands, one of the things that I hear is lack of communication, lack of transparency, lack of whatever X, Y, and Z that smaller brands may experience with these bigger distros. So for us, one of the things that when we just talk to other folks is we can provide that for you. We can provide that communication. We can, when the brand calls me and says, hey, how many units do I have of X, Y, and Z, I can let them know right on the spot. We can help them grow. We can help them do certain things. And so that's one of the ways that we kind of compete, I guess, with these larger brands
being
is,
nimble. That's really good.
Being very transparent, being very open and honest, and being able to deliver the promises that we're going to say we're going to keep for them. Because that at the end of the day, we're, as a distro, the way I see it is I'm the face of the brand that we're representing. As a driver, and so with these larger companies, they're constantly on the go. They may not do that for the smaller brands. And I have the availability, the capability to be able to do that and provide that for the brands.
Right on. Thanks. Hab, did you have some thoughts?
Well, I would say, whether you're a 1,000 square foot distro in Long Beach or a 30,000 square foot distribution facility in Long Beach, you can still have access to the same footprint, which is the entire state of California. So having a larger facility and building actually, I think, puts you in jeopardy because your overhead is so big, right? You have to have a lot of staff members. You have a big rent bill that you owe, electricity, air conditioning. By the time you add up your monthly nut, your burn rate, 200 grand a month.
Yeah, he ain't lying.
Now, if you have a 1,000 square foot distro in Long Beach where the tax is low, you're already competitive to the rest of the state. Where, let's say, another city might have a 5% gross tax on your revenues. So having 1% gross tax is much better than 5% gross tax. And especially if you have a smaller facility, smaller overhead. So how you compete is with your team, your people, right? A company isn't a company without good people. Good people mean good business. And so having a solid team, keeping your overhead low, whether you're 1,000 square feet or 10,000 square feet, doesn't matter. You can still service the same number of stores. So you can have 3 vans and cover all of Southern California. You don't need to have 10 vans. So you can compete just by being nimble and keeping your overhead low.
Sal, from your perspective, I know you work for a bit larger company, but when you see these companies that are a bit smaller, what makes one of them stand out to you and be like, oh man, those guys are really cool. They're doing something special.
I mean, like kind of what they said, like, touch base to what they said, like smaller company, that's the beauty of our space too. Like in some other, commodities, liquor and food, stuff like that, like it's impossible to compete because the big people just own it. But in our space, like the small guy can still win. You can compete with quality and you can compete with accuracy. You know what I'm saying? It's like you said, I mean, the brand has to understand, do you want to be in 300 stores? Do you understand what it means to be in 300 stores? Because it's logistically got its own interesting set of problems. You know what I mean? Some it's maybe, some brands aren't ready for that type of, movement or, growth or whatever it is, but then maybe that one day they will be. So like I said, I mean, with us, we have a ton of brands. And like I said, we're really blessed to have a lot of quality brands. Like I work with FloraCal, Sea Junkie, KK, like a bunch of like really big brands that have super solid products. So for us, like we have passion, like you said too, with personnel, it's super important. Like for me, like if you're doing it, you have to have passion for what you're doing in this space to be good at it, in my opinion. It can be done otherwise. But like I said, I mean, for us, like I have passion in all these brands. I love all these brands. I know all the owners. I know where like their investments came from, and I know their families and stuff like that. So it's super important for me to make sure their brands are successful, So for us, from a big company standpoint, like what we can offer is this massive space where I can put you in 300 stores tomorrow, theoretically. But I'm saying, a smaller company can maybe put you in every store within a 30-mile radius of their thing. And both of those are so valuable, you know what I'm saying? Because like I said, some brands, that's exactly what they need, you know what I mean? And then other brands are looking for something a little bit bigger. So like I said, that's kind of the beauty of the space to me is I'm like, I love, everyone has a spot in the space. There's all, if you're doing it right and you love what you're doing, you'll fit in somewhere,
Very much so. So let's keep it moving on a little bit. I know everybody wants to share a lot of thoughts. So the next question, maybe let's start off with Hab. So for you, how do you build the right relationships to make sure that you have the best product for the margins? How do you build that relationship with a brand?
Well, with the brands, I mean, to be honest with you, my distro, we only service one brand. We service High and Mighty, our house brand. We've tried distroing for other brands, but what we've realized, because we're a smaller outfit, smaller company, that a lot of brands who don't already have licenses don't really understand the trials and tribulations of being a licensed entity, right? A lot of the regulations and the rules, the taxes. And so we found that a brand that wasn't a license didn't understand the amount of logistics to happen to get their brand in stores, get them paid, get the taxes remitted properly, and do proper accounting. And because of that, lack of knowledge on their end, it was more of a headache to explain the regulations and the business to them. So for us, it was better to focus on ourselves, get strong with our own footprint, instead of trying to promise that footprint to other brands. So I don't know if that question's best answered by me per se.
Yeah,
Right.
I feel the same way
I actually wanted
too.
to point out that sometimes it is just a single thing that you need to focus on, right? We have multiple perspectives up here. So I actually knew that Hab had his brand, and wanted to find out from him directly, what does it take when you have to make that tough decision to maybe only carry one brand, and maybe that's your house brand, and that's where you're trying to start. Danny, what do you want to weigh in on?
Yeah, I think, back to Hab's point, like knowing the direction that you're headed within your business plan. And because I went through the same thing. As we're starting, we're still trying to figure out which lane we're trying to get into. And one of them was wanted to be, and it still is, but trying to find the right partners to do so. But to Hab's point, when speaking to brands, there are these comments of like, well, I want to be able to I want to do the delivery. I want to make this. I want to make that. And it's a hard no. Like I can't. Like it's a liability for me. Like there's a lot of nuances that are tied to the compliance side of of having the license. And so having to reel them in, and some of them get upset. Some of them are like, well, what if I pay? It makes it a headache. So I could understand that viewpoint of the logistics side of things and trying to build those margins for all that. I think that's more of like once you start manufacturing products and all that, then you figure those little things out. But when you're starting off, at least for me, I can't provide that at the moment.
Right. Sal, we'll finish up with you because we know that you just mentioned about putting people in 300 stores, right? So maybe a quick
Ish.
Right. So maybe a quick thought on what it takes to build that kind of relationship at scale.
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. Like with us, it's all about margin, because the bigger you get, the thinner the margin tends to be. You know what I mean? So for us, it has to be very specific and accurate and precise in that arena. Otherwise, we're just not making money. You know what I mean? And that's just something obviously at the end of the day, as a cannabis distribution license, that's what your goal is to, it's to be profitable. You know what I mean? So at the end of the day, that's for us, like focusing on brands and making sure that, there's a lot of support from the brands, building value in the brand. That's another thing I try to like emphasize in my people is like, it's not just about the price, it's about the value of the brand. Like what has the brand earned in the industry? Is it an OG like trappy brand that people love coming in, and then you have this leg up and you can start flying right away? Or is it like kind of a brand no one's ever heard of? Like you just have to be honest with yourself. You know what I mean? So, this is going to be a big shock, but there tends to be a lot of ego in the cannabis game. So no one's going to believe me here, I'm sure. But I'm like, at the end of the day, it's like, that's what it is. It's like, what has your brand done? What has your brand earned? And once it gets to where it needs to be, it'll do what it needs to do. But for us, like I said, you have to build value in the brand. That we're selling multiple brands into a dispensary. Like, why do they need this? Why do we need that? Multiple categories. Like, there's no shortage of products in the industry. You know what I mean? So to come in and have something new and special and unique or dynamic or whatever, like, it's tough. So the brand has to help. The distribution can only do so much. The brand has to be very involved in the success of their profitability, if you will.
And typically, the majority of distros out there don't sell your product into a store, so don't be delusional. They will logistically, physically get your products to that store, get your payments remitted, and do the accounting back to you. But they're typically make the sales and marketing of your brand into that store up to you. So if you can't sell into 5 stores, you're not going to get into those 5 stores. So just because he is servicing 300 stores does not guarantee any brand in this room 300 store placement. You might get lucky with a few intrinsically, but that's luck, not necessarily a sure thing. You still got to do sales and marketing, which is one of the biggest expenses in this industry because we don't have a lot of sales and marketing channels. Hi LBC is a lucky thing that you guys get to come to because we do it based off the LBCA's efforts, but this isn't typical for most cities. So you're fortunate.
Yeah.
Right on. So since you guys have been in business, what's been a memorable kind of pivot or a change that you guys have either had to go through or experience to make sure that you guys were staying on track for your particular business models?
I'll go.
Sure, go ahead.
For us, like just keeping with like the market trends, like this industry changes like every 15 minutes. Like by the time we leave here, something else will be cool. And I'm like, damn, I missed it. So I'm like, for us, like I say for us too, like another thing, like some of the pitfalls of being big, I'm like, we're a big ship in the harbor and we have a bunch of little sea doos that are way more nimble around us. So it's like, yeah, we might have some power behind us just based in size, but smaller companies can just pivot way easier. When something cool hits the ground, like rosin, for instance, all of a sudden, I've been a big rosin head my whole life, but now all of a sudden hash holes are big and rosin's big and this and that. And I'm like, for us, it's, we have to logistically make sure it makes sense for us. We have to multiple brands that are going to try to fight for that space at the same time. Whereas like someone that has a smaller license, you can create your own brand and you can distro it tomorrow. You know what I mean? So there's definitely, like I said, but there's different ways to do different things in the space. So that's a good part of it,
I've definitely pivoted a ton of times within the last few months. Just again, thinking that my original game plan when I got the license was, hell yeah, like I'm a Latino in the space. I'm a Latino license owner, which is there isn't that many of us. And I'm like, I want to distro for like all of the smaller equity brands and do this and do that. And then I'm like, when we start talking about it, I'm like, fuck, I can't right now. So I can't, like, it, like for all the points that we've already discussed, like I can't. And so I had to pivot to like, all right, well, what can I do? And we have one of the large facilities. And so now I'm like, all right, well, let me do storage space. Brands that need, like, with the company that we worked with, like it was a big warehouse until it really wasn't, with all of the work, all of the packaging that was required, all of the, the units and everything. And so I'm thinking like, all right, well, shit, I know there's a bunch of brands that are they need the space. I have the space. So offering that and pivoting to finding clients that need storage space to help me cover the nut, or finding other avenues to just keeping afloat while other things continue to develop in the time that we're working.
I don't know a licensee that hasn't pivoted a few times since they went live with their license. My group specifically, part of the pivoting is, the dynamic nature of our pricing, right? So prices have plummeted in the last several months. And so products that you might have had a little bit of margin with before have suddenly gone to zero. So there is no margin. So it's not even a point to make those products. So like if you're packaging flour and pre-rolls, but you don't grow the flour and pre-rolls, and now you're buying them, like your margin might be eliminated just because you have to buy them from another source just to package them, just to put them on a shelf. And there's so much downward pressure from the store owners to keep prices low for the consumers that there is no margin or profit in your product. And like I want you guys to think about something. If you're a distro or even if you're a manufacturer, if you add one person to your payroll, and let's say, they make $3, $4, $5 grand a month, just make it $4 grand a month, right? So do they make you $4 grand of profit every month to hire them? Not $4 grand of revenue, because revenue doesn't mean profit. So to make $4 grand of profit, you might have to, sell 14 grand worth of something to actually make $4 grand of profit. So hiring someone is a big decision to make, whether that justifies what service they're providing you. Do they bring revenue in? Are they just a service functionality? So adding drivers doesn't mean more revenue unless you can go to more stores and sell product into those stores. And what's the reorder rate in those stores? So pivoting is a constant thing in this industry because our margins are constantly dynamically changing. And margin is what tells you how much money you're keeping in your pockets at the end of the day. And if you don't keep money in your pockets at the end of the day, your burn rate's gonna be so high, you're gonna be out of business within a few months. And it happens quickly. And so we're in a crunch period right now with the cannabis industry because of the downward pressure of pricing. And I'll pause there.
Right on. That's actually a good lead into kind of our, our next question. So with the current state of the industry, what are your thoughts on being able to scale a cannabis business? There's a lot of concern around upcoming regulations or changes to that, and all kinds of things that, is on everybody's minds. But what do you think it takes to scale, or what might be some challenges that you guys run into?
Well, the good thing about distribution as to scale a distribution facility, you don't need, like I said, 20,000 square foot space. Literally, if you really want to truly scale and you're doing well with your distro, you could just, like he was saying, Danny was saying earlier, you could rent a room out of another distro up north that has extra space. So you're doing so well in Southern California, you just need a Northern California hub. So you find a like-minded licensee that you can partner with where you're renting a room out per month and you give them a flat fee, or maybe it's a fee based on how much product is moved out of there. So you got to work a deal out where it doesn't take all of your margin or your profit, but it still allows you to scale. So now you have a Northern California hub and a Southern California hub. Southern California is your license facility. Northern California is a sublease of someone else's licensed facility. So you didn't have to buy a building, you didn't have to rent a building, you just rented a room. So it depends on how much scaling you really want to do. Do you just want a touch point? Otherwise, you could just send drivers up north to service all the dispensaries you're in up there until you get so much business, it doesn't justify the 8-hour drive to get up there. It justifies getting a place. So until, I wouldn't go out and get a second license, go buy a building, get it licensed. It takes 1.5 to 2 years to get licensed anywhere. I don't care. But the cool thing about distro is it doesn't have to be pretty. It just has to be secure, right? So you don't have to put a lot of money into distribution, but I don't care what license you get in California, nothing's quick. It's a 6-month to 1.5 to 2 year process just to get a license on a wall to say that you can start operating. So scaling isn't a quick thing in the industry. You got to be strategic and network and find other like-minded facilities that you can work with until it justifies getting a second license.
Any other thoughts?
For me, I would say, like, for the thought that I have, like, when you're talking about scaling is more products. So like I said, we have a sales team too. So like I said, so for us, like, scaling products, and I'm like, it's really is based on the quality of the product. Like, I feel like the market will tell you if your brand will hold 60 stores, 80 stores, 100 stores, whatever it may be. You know what I mean? So I'm like, it becomes an inventory issue. It becomes a logistics issue. So I'm like, it's just as bad to be short as it is to be long. You know what I mean? So that's where, it's from my perspective and things that I've seen with multiple brands. I've, worked with 50 brands in 4 years. You know what I mean? I've seen brands do really well, and I've seen brands become very profitable. And then, like I said, about the pricing, that's the thing too. Like, some people are so stuck on their pricing where their SOs are this, and if it gets off of that, then they're in trouble. And you see, like, brands can get in trouble super fast, and they just go away. So I'm like, you really got to be cautious to what could happen. Obviously, we were an industry that did well during COVID period, if you will. Like, we were able to be open, we were able to do this. So I'm like, really, there was a hard spike in what was for that. We were considered. What was it called? What was the term? Important? Yeah. Essential, yeah. So we were an essential business. So the economy had more money. It was spiked with all this extra cash, and then we were considered an essential business. So all these companies were like, oh my God, this is so easy. You just come into the cannabis business, and next thing you know, you're worth $40 million. And now, like, all of those companies are either gone or struggling. You know what I mean? So like I said, it has a way of, people that tend to know this industry more, have a better, because we all know that. If you've been growing weed your whole life, some years you get 1,800, some years you don't. You know what I mean? So I'm like, you better consider the fact that you don't. You might be halfway through your run and it goes to shit. Now what? You still owe the electric bill.
Yeah, and that's real on that part, because when with that company that I was with, like, during COVID, that's when that company soared, and we went from building 5 to 10 orders in a day to 150 orders in a day, and we just were going and moving, and it became a moment where now they just started hiring people, and they just hired whoever, and then quality of the products started to go down because there wasn't no proper training that was being done on the manufacturing side of things. And then inventory, like you mentioned, became an issue because with brands, they're moving so fast that then they forget about inventory, and if it's not the product inventory, then it's the packaging inventory or the labels that's required to make the order. And then they get excited, like, hell yeah, I just got into this network of 10 shops, but can you service those shops? Can you provide them with the next order next month? Right. And most likely network shops come with terms. normally 30-day terms. Can you provide the next order before they pay you 30 days, which 30 days ends up being 45 to 60 days? Can you produce that next order? And that's where, I've seen it happen where we're like moving, and then the company ended up getting sold, and it just, like, you to that point, like, they were worth X amount, and then right now at the moment with everything going on, everyone's, you see layoffs everywhere now.
Yeah, it's a little survival-y.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And if your SOPs weren't strong and you didn't have the right things in order, like it's gonna, you're gonna notice it really quick. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we've talked about having to pivot and changes happening in the business. We know that happens to a lot of business owners. We've talked about, thoughts on scaling right now when we're coming off of this interesting kind of spike in business from the world kind of pandemic that went on and everything like that. So where do you guys really see the industry going next? Let's maybe talk 5 years and then make up your own kind of projection after that.
I mean, like I said, for us, like, we still are a brand new industry. It's like you forget that legally it's been, 5 years or whatever it is, whatever the first one, But I'm like, it's still such a brand new industry that, like, you forget. Like, if you look at, liquor, for instance, as a roadmap of what could be, from a tax perspective and all kinds of different reasons. Like, it's still brand new in the infancy. So I'm like, for me, it's gonna go nothing but up. Like, I feel like I'm gonna be in this industry forever, no matter what. So, like, it's gonna go down, it's gonna go up, it's gonna be what it is. So I'm like, you better put some money under your mattress when it's good, because next year it might not be that way. So I'm like, just pay attention to what's going on, and for me, it's always gonna be good. So if you're not paying attention to the trends, or you're doing something that seems dangerous, like, then it probably is. So just do things the right way and make sure you're doing things quality. Make friends with people. Like I said, we're blessed in this industry. Like, most of the people I meet, I'm just so happy to be with. Like, I'd be friends with them in real life. And I'm like, that's not the case in most industries, you know what I'm saying? Where you just have to deal with people at work. You go home and, like, defrag. I'm like, I can defrag at work sometimes, you know what I'm saying? Because these are, like, the people that I enjoy, that I like, and we have like-minded shit. So for me, I'm like, just be happy and be blessed. I said, dude, no one buys anything from people that don't like you. So I'm like, no matter what we set up here, like, if you're an unlikable person, like, or a miserable person, like, just be happy and just enjoy what we do, you know what I'm saying? Because it is what we do, so. But that, for me, that's, I think it's going to go nothing but up. I know there's people that have negative, perspectives and whatnot, but for me, I think it's going to be great, so.
I can't believe we get to do this for work.
I know,
So,
right?
I mean, this is a lot of fun.
It's insane.
I'm excited about where the industry is going in 5 years. I just a little nervous about the next 2, I would say. But after that, I think legislatively we're doing the right things locally to kind of fix, like, local rules and, like, regulations, taxes per se. It's a local fight, but there's also a state fight, right? California is a dual licensing state. You have to get locally licensed and state licensed. That also means there's 2 levels of taxes. There's local taxes and state taxes, and they're all onerous. And so we have to kind of fix that in order for it to be a viable industry. Besides the 280E tax law that the federal government imposes. Like, taxes, it's not a fun conversation, but if those things aren't fixed, we're not a viable industry. Like, if you looked on a spreadsheet and you compared our industry to, let's say, the alcohol industry or any other industry, our industry looks like shit because of the way we're taxed. Like, the revenues are just taken, the profits are taken right out of your pocket because of not having any write-offs on a federal level. And that's a major thing as a business. So to, like, Wall Street, we're not really viable businesses because of that onerous tax structure. So once we get the local taxes fixed, which here at the LBCA we're doing here in Long Beach, at least, if you're not in Long Beach, let's, get involved in your local city and get involved in the politics. The state level, there's a fight there. There's eliminated cultivation tax, big win for the state, but we have a lot to work on with the excise tax. On the federal level, 280E, that's a big conversation, but federal legalization is inevitable. When, who the hell knows, but it'll open up some awesome things like banking. Wouldn't it be great to get a bank loan and get a legitimate bank account without paying $1,000 a month for that privilege?
Oh, I just got my first monthly bank bill. That was the word that hurt my heart.
Right? $1,000 I pay every month just to have a bank account that every other business gets for free. And then, I'm a distributor, but I don't want to always have to drive in my car to distribute something. Wouldn't it be great to do mail order cannabis? Wow, think about that. I just mail it to you. That's brilliant, and that'll open up the game and level the playing field. Whether you're a mom and pop or some big 50,000 square foot facility, post office, I can mail anything just like the 50,000 square foot facility to anybody in America. And that will happen. Canada, by the way, is all mail order. So it's not like it's not possible. It just needs to be federally legalized. So we have some ways to go. But in 5 years, I think that'll happen, and we'll rock on.
Yeah, I mean, they took the words right out of my mouth.
All right, sounds good. Another question about brands. What could make a brand interesting to want to be able to sell and distribute?
So for me, like I mentioned earlier, I'm proud of the fact that I'm one of the few Latino license owners in the state, and so I'm always looking out for any Latino-owned brands or any POC brands that are out there to be able to help. Those are always first on my list of brands that I'd want to work with. Also looking at what's their mission, what are their vision, where do they see themselves, understanding that I'm not going to do their sales for them. All these little things are the things that I look for when I am working with brands is, can we work together? There's also that relationship. Are we going to work together, in a respectful way? And do I want to continue business with them 3 months from now, 6 months from now, 5 years from now? I could only imagine there's probably a few brands that you had that you're like, fuck these guys, man. I don't want to, but they're and so you have to have that conversation with yourself or with your business partners. Do we want to take this on? Or do we want to take the road where I'm just going to self-distribute and self-manufacture, just like Hab is doing, right? And you eliminate all of that. And so there's all those factors that go into it when I'm looking to decide whether we are going to work with certain brands or not.
Right on. Yeah, every business has to decide kind of the different partners and vendors that it's going to get involved with, right? But in cannabis, because it is such a new industry per se on the legal side, we hear about a lot of friction there. But we see so much positivity coming out of that as well. Talk about a positive experience that you guys have had recently, working with a partner or something. You don't necessarily have to name drop, but give us a scenario that really made you happy that you were working within the community and industry.
For us, all our brands like to be involved in the dispensary partners, all their projects and grand openings and stuff they're doing and anniversaries and stuff like that. So I'm super proud of that because I really honestly like to give people free shit. Going to give people free weed is it's one of my favorite things in this whole industry. So I'm super proud when brands get behind that and spend some money that they really realistically don't have to, you know what I'm saying? But they still spend money and do stuff like that. And it's good for the culture and it's fun, you know what I mean? So, but for our brands, another thing too, for us, I love when brands are pivotable too. So I say for us, we have a sales and distribution. So we really have kind of we're paying attention to the market, exactly what's going on. We see new stuff. You see successful stuff immediately. This brand all of a sudden. And then you can have a conversation with 12 sales reps throughout the state. They're like, yeah, we're seeing it too. We're seeing it too. They're like, oh shit, they're doing well. You know what I'm saying? And then BDS reports come out. You're like, oh, sure enough, they're doing well. So I'm like, that's for us. We like to be able to say, hey, this seems to be working in the market. Like I said, we all seen the testing situation that happened over the last 2 years where it was this big terpene conversation. That conversation doesn't exist as much anymore. You know what I mean? So everything has to be a certain thing or a certain this. So you're just not going to succeed. You know what I mean? So brands have to understand that this is, if you're not going to abide by what the market's telling us right now, then my chance of distributing your product goes down greatly. You know what I mean? So, but for us, luckily enough, our brands are super, responsive to what we say because they know that their success, relies on it. So, but as far as a positive thing, those are all positive things because, like I said, paying attention to what's going on and then reacting to it from my point of view helps me distribute your brand. So, you helping me help you is huge. You know what I mean? So, communication.
I just wanted cannabis is one of those industries where there's a lot of there's a lot of cutthroat, but there's also a lot of loyalty, right? So your network is your strength. The stronger your network is, the stronger your business will become. And so, not specifically speaking on the brand side of it, but although it does correlate, but on the bulk side of things, so my distro also does a lot of bulk business. And that relies heavily on my network and the loyalty of that network. Just because the other group is selling something a little cheaper doesn't mean they leave me in a heartbeat. Like, there's a loyalty factor, and that's built up because of community relations, going to events, being outspoken, sharing knowledge, communicating one-on-one with people, looking people in the eye, caring about their story, but also sharing your story, because that connection might lend you a tip, and that tip might lead into a sale or into a dispensary or meet a dispensary owner. Like, it's all networking in this industry right now. So a lot of the, say, corporate cannabis who doesn't have the mom and pop feel and the networking love that I'm talking about, they can't be as nimble, and they aren't at these kind of events. This is a very intimate crowd of people to be able to network to, right? And you see a lot of these familiar faces over and over, right? We see a lot of these people. I've seen a lot of the faces in the crowd here time and time again. So get jobs, people. Come on. Just kidding.
Come on, guys, give yourselves a hand.
There you go.
We wouldn't be up here if it wasn't for you guys. Go ahead, Danny.
That was a big point, because like he said, regarding relationship building, networking, going back to what we discussed about pivots, like that was another pivot of ours, like for us to be able to maintain overhead was, if it wasn't storage, it's bulk sales. And where I came from, I came from just from the last mile version of distribution. And so trying to do bulk sales in the beginning was tough for me. And there were times I was just like, man, I don't know if I can do this, because I didn't know the buyers. I didn't know where to find a buyer. And it wasn't until I started coming out to more events and, just like you mentioned, creating that network, creating those relationships, building that trust of the products that whatever products you say you're selling to them, it's going to be that. To build that trust with those buyers has definitely helped. And so building those relationships and building those networks, those are some of the products that I've been experiencing within the last 2 months now. Things are just starting to get moving. We're starting to build up business, and it's there. I see where at first it was the light was a train coming straight at me. Now it feels like it's the tunnel that I'm going towards because of just the work that I was going at. Because real stuff, man, I was just like, dang, this is gonna be hard. But just continue to keep work at it. It does definitely some of the positive sides of this industry.
Right on. That's very good. Thank you guys for sharing that with us. So we want to talk about now, you mentioned the bulk sales, right? We've been a little bit heavy on the brands because that's kind of the big visible part. That's what everybody gets kind of whooped about, right, on the consumer side. We're coming a little bit closer to the end of our conversation here. We've still got maybe 10 or so minutes. But tell us about the services that each of you guys' businesses offer, right? So that everybody has an idea of what are you really doing as a distro, because it can vary. There's a lot of nuance to the distribution piece of the supply chain. So fill us in, kind of what do you do?
Yeah, so right now, like I mentioned, we've been doing storage space for companies, for brands, and we have a client that has their storage space with us, and it's maybe 10% cannabis products, and the rest is the packaging and a lot of different other non-cannabis items that are there. So we have that. I provide transportation. We're a team of 3, and we have 2 trucks. I'm making the drives. I'm doing transport. So we provide transportation for companies, whether we're doing bulk transport from one license to another, up and down the state. We provide bulk sales. We're doing it, whether it's bulk flower, frozen material, trim material, whatever it is that the client's asking for. I'm out there trying to hustle and find it to try to make that extra dollar to be able to cover that nut that I have. packaging. We just started packaging. We started offering packaging for retailers, which has been pretty successful for us. And we're packaging the house brand for the retail shop, which is it's been helpful for us because it guarantees a reorder, right? It guarantees a reorder for us where I'm not, if it's a brand that I'm packaging for, I'm kind of waiting for them to try to make that sell and get paid. Doing it with the retailer, I know it's gonna get sold, and I know they're gonna need to reorder. So that's been also picking up for us. So like I mentioned, these last few months has just been picking up with all these relationships that I've built in the past with the previous company and all the networks that we have. Everyone's finding out that you got a license now? Let me help you get some business. Let me help you do this. Let me throw you a line here and there. And it just goes back to that relationship building to be able to build the different type of services that we can provide. Because since we're lean, I can do anything that's available to us, really.
And it's amazing how everybody's so happy that you have a license, right? It's these days, it's not like, oh my God, what are you doing? So amazing that we can do that.
We're fortunate in that, we have a manufacturing and a distribution license. So just to kind of generalize, manufacturing says I can touch oil products and make oil-based products, where distribution, you can't really handle raw oil. You can only handle dried flower or make them into pre-rolls, right? So those two licenses allow me to touch oil-based products or flower-based products. And so we tried everything in the 3 years we've been open now. We've pivoted so many times. We've packaged flower into jars. We've made pre-rolls. We've made infused pre-rolls. We've made vape carts. We've white-labeled for other groups. We've distributed for other brands. We make large bulk distillate oil. And we tried everything. When you get to try everything, you realize quickly what you don't like. And then you realize what has more margins, so you start to like those things more, right? Maybe you didn't think you'd like them more, but you realize, wow, I like to make some money, so I like those things. So
that's the driving force. Yeah.
We do those things more now, where I did like some of the other things, but I didn't make any money, so I started hating them. So I stopped doing them. It's like, I'm sorry, but for me, making pre-rolls was a loss. I didn't make any money making pre-rolls for other groups or myself. It was just a throwaway. But I got to meet a lot of cool people, and that brought other things to happen. And so I think you try all these things just to either you get a really good account that you can service well, and maybe now I'm gonna be a specialty of that because I like the way that service model works. We tried so many different things. We picked the 2 to 3 things out of the 10 that we tried that made us the more money and that we were the most passionate about. And for us, making bulk distillate, so I take thousands of pounds of trim and I make it into golden oil, and I sell that golden oil in a jar without a label on it, besides a metric label, but it's not marketed.
Prove it.
I don't have to market it. I don't have to advertise. It's just raw oil that every manufacturer needs to make their gummies and their infused products. So that raw oil that I didn't have to spend money to market sells itself. So that bulk product is what makes my company survive and thrive. Now, the passion is our brand, High and Mighty. I got sick of dealing, no offense to any other brands, with other brands who just didn't know any better. They had a passion for their name, so that was their business plan, their name. A name is not a business plan, right? Having a unique skill of how to make a really good product, being OG in the industry, like you were saying, and then you got a leg up coming in, that's a good plan. But like if you just have a name, I want to come up with Sky High Cannabis. You don't know what products you're going to make. You don't know anything about the industry. You just think cannabis is going to make you some money. So that's my brand. I want to do something. That is not something I want to work with because there's really no plan in that. So I moved away from servicing bad business plans of other brands and focused on my business plan of my brand. Now, maybe when I get really good and get into a lot of stores and have a solid foundation, I'll start cherry picking other brands that I like, that I think have a good foundation, because my trucks are already going there It won't be such a big deal to add your truck. Actually, it won't cost me any extra money. I'm already going to be there. So now that's pure profit or margin for me, right? As long as the headache in dealing with your brand isn't more effort than the profit is worth to my company. So service myself and my brand first, high and mighty, get strong with it, add brands that complement that. So I'm a topical brand. I'm not going to go get another topical brand. I'm going to go find something or another brand of a product that I don't make, I don't do, right? And somebody's got to be really good at it because now my distribution license has got its name on it and I'm backing it up by taking it to those stores. Now, what I think one of the hardest things to do is the sales and marketing of the industry, and that's where I'll hand the mic over to Sal, because I'd like to actually hear a little bit more about what you guys got going on.
Yeah, so it's funny to say, like, it's super interesting what you're saying, because I'm like, essentially, that's what we did. Like, because we started a certain amount of brands in the legal market before we had a distribution license, and we were distributed by someone else. Okay, so we had brands, but then we seen the value essentially in that almost verbatim of what you said. It's like, we're kind of already going this way. Like, our brands are fairly successful. We already had manufacturing and cultivation licenses. We were growing our own stuff. We were using our own trim for our oil. We were super vertically integrated, when that word gets tossed around a lot. But we were like super proud that we were vertically integrated. Everything we did was start to finish. We made it all. And then the only thing we had is someone else that distributed it for us. Mm-hmm. And then mainly, so it was in that style of distribution where all they did is distribute it. We still had a sales team that represented our 4 house of brands, and then they all distributed our products for us. But then at some point,
So they were doing last mile.
yes, exactly. So yeah, so that at that point, it was successful, but it was at a time when it wasn't. It's always hard to be successful. So I hate to say that, but it was just easier to be successful. Now strategically you have to have a good plan, or it's going to be difficult to be successful. Back then you could still be a little loose around the edges and kind of figure it out. So we just got lucky at the timing as far as that goes, and then picked up other brands, and then they seen the success of our brands, and next thing you know, now we're kind of more focusing on distribution. We still have our brands within our.
You actively went and got a distribution license then?
We had one the whole time.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and then we purchased another. We've had multiple licenses the whole time, so they just didn't use the licenses at that time. So cultivation license, manufacturing licenses, the whole thing. But the distribution part for us, the business plan made more sense for us to have some distributor in the beginning, because like I said, we started, believe it or not, like to get big, we got big fast, but we started with 10 stores and 20 stores and 50 stores and 80 stores. And the next thing you know, we're almost like, oh shit, like what, we better figure something out, or it doesn't make sense for us to do this. So, that's how that worked out for us.
So you can see there's a lot of ways that you can approach this type of license from a business model. So it's about time for us to wrap it up, but we need one last quick question answer from you guys. Let's see here where I had it. What's one piece of practical advice you would give to someone who wants to get a distribution license? And let's keep it pretty short, because that'll wrap us up.
Keep your overhead low as possible. If to get in the industry, I would say the distribution license is probably the easiest license to attain, easiest license to build out, maybe not necessarily the easiest license to make money, but it'll start you off and you can make products with the distribution license, but keep your expenses and your overhead low. You don't need a big footprint of a building. Small can get you by, but too small won't let you thrive. So you can't be like 200 square feet kind of thing. You got to have maybe a couple of rooms, but you don't have to have a massive space. So it's probably the least expensive license to get tapped into.
I would say for me, like, if you're gonna start it, if a distro license from ground up right now or from scratch, like, have a brand attached to it. Like, have a brand that you have an idea of that you can sell or self-distribute to your own brand. Now it makes, like I said, almost to our models conversation, it makes sense to be going to these places. Because like I said, to just have a distro, that's a tough gig. You know what I'm saying? If you have a brand attached to it, or if you can procure for a brand and create a brand, you know what I'm saying? You have somebody else. Like for I said, I have lots of friends that own dispensaries and stuff like that. So I'm like, they have the licensing to do it. They just never have the outreach to do it. So I'm like, okay, well, I'll be the outreach to do it. So let's go into this with 3 brands, like a budget flower brand and an indoor brand and then a rosin brand. So I'm like, now we can compete. It makes sense for us to be sitting in the waiting room, you know what I'm saying, from a sales perspective, you know, but for me, that would be the thing is like have an idea, a sales idea in mind, like have a brand idea in mind, like have something that makes sense for you to be there.
Have a plan?
Yeah.
Danny, you want to wrap us up, please?
Yeah, I would say just like any business, it's going to be a lot of time. It's going to be a lot of energy that you put into it. And being authentic with yourself, being authentic with the relationships that you're building will help you thrive with any direction you're going to go into. As long as you're authentic, you're genuine, and you have that honest relationships with others, it's going to help you get through.
Fantastic. Well, thank you guys again for coming out to join us this evening here at man, I keep getting that backwards tonight. Cannabis Capitol. Sorry about that, guys. But anyway, we want to thank Sal, Hab, and Danny. Our topic was cannabis distribution, and we invite you guys to come back to another Hi LBC. Generally, we have those every third Friday of the month, I believe. So thank you guys for supporting us.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening.